Ron Paul served in Congress during the late 70s and early 80s. He then was a Libertarian Party candidate for president in 1988, returned to Congress in 97 with representing the 14th Congressional District of Texas. Then he left Congress in 2012. He's also the author of several books, including Challenge to Liberty, The Case for Gold in a Republic, If You Can Keep It. Congressman, thanks for coming on the program. Appreciate it as always.
Good to be with you, Alan.
Are you missing the life in politics?
No.
You're not?
Yeah, no, that's an easy answer. Easy question to answer. No, I've been able to still talk about issues and participate in different ways, so that's always been my desire anyway, to talk about issues, not to really to be in politics for the sake of being in politics.
But you were an important voice because nobody else was saying the stuff you were saying and having a national platform to do it.
Yeah, that generally has been the case. There are other people saying it. That the problem is if I had never gone to Congress, you and I probably wouldn't be speaking today.
I'm not sure about that because we spoke, as you know, a long time ago when you ran as Libertarian Party candidate.
Yeah.
You've been...
So, of course, I got started being in Congress. But we do know that you have, with the general media, you have more credibility if you have a political office. But there are others out there who do good work, from my viewpoint, write the serious things about foreign policy, and I hope I can continue to contribute to that.
And you got Rand in there now who can often pick up the baton.
He'll get all the attention. And I'll
Let me ask you about, speaking of foreign policy, the two most recent appointments just today, Samantha Power, who is being nominated by Obama for the United Nations, and another appointment today for National Security Advisor Susan Rice. Do you have any response or reaction to those appointments?
Not very strong reaction, mainly because I look at that as, pretty much status quo, no changes. People who believe in a lot more intervention than I do, not going to argue the case that we ought to be less engaged rather than being more engaged. And I don't expect either one of them to ever suggest that maybe we ought to give up on drone warfare and the principle of assassination and following the Bush doctrine of undeclared wars, preemptive wars. Those are the kind of things that I think are the big issues that the American people aren't talking about, so they get hung up on differences in personality and this partisanship. If Republicans do it, the Democrats complain. If the Democrats do it, the Republicans complain. And sometimes the policies are, very, very similar. So
that's true. In fact, they were both interventionists with Libya. I'm not so sure they feel that way about Syria, but Libya, in fact, Dennis Kucinich, with whom I know you share some views, believes that Benghazi's problem was the fact that we went into Libya in the first place. Had we not gone and invaded Libya, removed the government, and created a vacuum, the tragedy of Benghazi would probably not have happened.
I agree with him, and he actually serves on my board that I started a new group, an Institute for Peace and Prosperity, which is on foreign policy. And there were more than just one or two times that he and I might have taken a vote, by ourselves. Not that others didn't agree with it, but politically, it was just a little bit too much, for people to come with us. But he would stand firm, and I really admired him because, he would say the same things whether it was Bush or Obama, where how the wind blows a lot of other times, if Bush does it, it's okay, but if Obama does it, it's horrible, and vice versa.
Well, I'm with guys like you and Andrew Napolitano on issues like the drones, on issues like civil liberties, the Patriot Act. I call myself a libertarian sometimes. but listen, there was a dream ticket. Some people wanted a Paul Kucinich or vice versa ticket. That would have been a dream ticket for some people.
Well, that might have gotten a little bit of attention. Maybe the media would have been forced to give us a little bit of time.
Let me ask you about what's going on with the IRS scandal. I know you'd like to do away with the IRS, but even if we had a flat tax or if we had what's called a fair tax, you'd still need an agency to implement it. So what is the ultimate answer? And do you think it goes as far as the White House in terms of level of involvement in directing them to go after particular groups?
Yeah, I think it always goes up. They pretend it doesn't, but it's a bipartisan deal. It's been going on for a long time. It happened with Roosevelt and Nixon, and all of them have participated to punish their enemies. But on the tax things, you're right. If you had a flat tax, somebody's going to be checking you. There's still going to be an IRS coming around and doing things, and how are you going to deduct and decide what your real income is. So I've never really gotten involved a lot in the minutia of debating what kind of a tax we have, although I had a very strong position. I thought the income tax was horrible. We don't need it. We didn't have it for a long time. I think the real issue is why do we need the money? And, of course, you do need the money if you're running a foreign policy of well over $1 trillion a year, and also getting involved in welfare that we as libertarians don't endorse. So that means the spending is the problem. That spending has to come out of the marketplace, and therefore politicians make the decision. But I say the spending is the tax, because governments then can tax us, but there's a limit. What if they taxed us for all the government that we're getting now, and they raise taxes by $1 trillion? I don't think anybody is advocating that. So then they have to borrow the money, and there's a limit to that, because that'll push interest rates up. So then it's back to, well, what else can we do? How can we fool the people even longer? And that's when they print the money, and that's where we are today. So the people pay, and I think we're on a regressive system because the people who suffer the most, and I think even the Fed statistics now show that the middle class have really suffered in these last 5 years. They haven't recovered like the banks have recovered. So when you print money, the middle class suffers, the prices go up, and they lose their jobs. So I think the system that we have today is a taxing system on the middle class, and the middle class is getting much poorer.
Do you prefer a flat tax or a fair tax?
Well, I like the idea of flat and fair, like zero.
well, zero tax, but that's certainly not realistic. But
well, only, there was a time when we didn't have it. But my promise when I was in office and campaigning was that I would always do whatever I could to reduce the power of the IRS and reduce your taxes. So if it's a fair tax, which is a sales tax, it's unfair to some people. So there's nothing fair to retired people if you have that. And flat taxes. What if they, give you a flat tax and you get a 62% flat tax and you have no deductions and no way you can whittle that down a bit? So the shortcomings always come up. So I don't have a preference other than lower taxes and lower spending and doing what we can to remove the power of the Internal Revenue Service, which is now bearing out what I've warned about, in the fact that it's dangerous not only to the abuse of the power, but also to our civil liberties. Because I don't think it's a good idea to have the government come to Alan Combs and say, "Hey, Alan, I don't think you paid your bills yet, so you come in here and bring all your records. You prove that you didn't do wrong. So your rights are being abused. You're guilty until you prove yourself innocent." So I sort of have to chuckle a little bit to getting these IRS agents on the defensive. But you know who's paying for their attorneys? You and I are paying for their attorneys.
So how would you handle this in D.C. if you were able to make these decisions? How would you handle this issue with the IRS?
You mean the corruption?
Yeah.
Abuse. Well, you just have to do your very best to have the best appointments that agree with you on the same philosophy and start from the day one to try to root it out and prevent it from happening. And the second you find out it happens, find out who did what and when and fire them quickly.
We're not going to do away with the IRS, so we're not going to do away with the tax structure, but is there what is the right, are there right amounts to tax us that still pay all the bills? But your answer, of course, reduce government to begin with, but that's not happening because you can't. It's hard to answer that question because you've got to be able to reduce the government to the level you'd like it to see in the first place in order to get the tax structure you want.
Yeah, you do, and you're right. Even if I were the president, the spending wouldn't have been cut, like I would have to do, to do it. But all we can do is argue the case that the best for the economy and best for the middle class and best for peace is to cut back on the spending. But I think you point out the burden that we have because it's not going to happen. I'm not going to be the president. I'm not going to have a Congress that's going to act logically and whittle away at this and work our way out of this. No, we're going to continue to. There's no way that we can overcome the political pressure of spending and deficits, borrowing and printing money until people give up on this system and they give up on the dollar. And unfortunately, that's what we're going to face. I think we face a crisis which in many ways is similar to what happened to the Soviet system. We didn't have to fight a nuclear war with them. They just broke down because the communist system didn't work. It just collapsed.
Do you think that's going to happen to us too?
I think in many ways. Look how states are getting bolder than ever before. People don't trust the government. They don't believe in the government. And when you have runaway inflation or significant inflation, they're just going to ignore the government. The underground economy is a $2 trillion a year business right now, and it's huge. But I think the economy is going to become much less efficient. I don't think there's really any significant recovery of note. They say, "Oh, housing prices are going up." Yeah, but what if the housing prices are going up, but we're not having more jobs?
And what if the jobs we are getting are paying much less than the ones that we're losing? So that's another problem as well.
Boy, yeah, that's for sure. And you don't recover those manufacturing jobs that went overseas, and you have to deal with the tax code. You ask about the particulars. The one thing that we could do is change the corporate tax rate. We're the largest corporate tax rate in the world. No wonder they send their money overseas, and they don't want to bring it back here. And
many corporations don't pay their fair share. I mean, again, there's got to be the same laws applying to everybody, and some corporations could do it with paying very little, and others pay full amount. That's not fair either.
No, with tongue in cheek but halfway serious, my very first political talk I ever gave in 1974, I said my solution was that taxes should never be higher than 10%. Our churches don't ask us for more than a tithe. Yeah. So why do we think more of our government than we do of our churches? But that didn't fly.
Ron Paul is our guest. Just one more thing I want to cover with you, if I could, which is that speaking of not trusting the government, this issue having to do with the Associated Press and James Rosen of Fox News, with the Attorney General went and offered a subpoena in order to get and called James Rosen the co-conspirator, and went after the AP to get records claiming they may have breached national security. The issue of freedom of the press, of course, now the feeling is that that's being compromised by this administration. Should Eric Holder resign as a result of some of these issues?
Well, if he doesn't resign, he should be fired, because I think he was in charge, and of course he's dancing around how much direct responsibility he has. But no, he shouldn't be in that office with what's going on. But we shouldn't have this president. We shouldn't have Bush president when they decide that you can start preemptive wars. There's so much of a mess. They said, well, should we impeach the president, solve our problems? Yeah, but you'd have to impeach the whole Congress.
Have you called for Holder to be fired up before now?
No.
But do you think he should be fired?
Well, I mean, you asked me about it. No, I don't go out. That isn't my thing. I try to divorce it from the personalities. Of course, talk shows and news items are always more exciting.
Well, I mean, I understand that, but again, this is not.
No, I'm not going to write an article this week, nor did I write one last week of why these guys should be fired. I want to change people's minds and attitude, and why we might have a foreign policy that even you and I can agree on.
Sure. Well, look, I agree with you a lot on foreign policy. I don't think we should go into.
So I want to emphasize that. So if you concentrate on the partisanship of taking somebody and impeaching them or kicking them out of office, I think it really misses the point about the business cycle. See, right. we do well in civil liberties and foreign policy, but you and I someday I would love to find out if there's what we agree with on economic issues, and what you think of the business cycle, and if you disagree with my observation of the business cycle, why is that case? And I do have these conversations with Dennis Kucinich.
Yeah.
We talk about this, and we have our friendly disagreements.
Yeah, well, I'd love to sit down with you when next time you're in New York. I'd love to have you in our studio and talk to you for a greater length of time, if possible. But
it might happen someday.
Always love seeing you, and I love to have you on the show. Thank you. And I know I'm not looking to get you into a personality conflict with anybody, but I think it was a fair question, and because Holder and what his future is a big issue now nationally. So
it is, and that's what politicians are supposed to deal with. How do you solve it? What do you do? Get rid of them.
All right, Dr. Paul, thank you for your time. Appreciate it as always.
Very good.